let's talk about some fucking books. It's been a while since the last time I made a video. I think it was New Year's Eve, and it's been, okay, so it's January 31st, the 30th as I'm recording this right now. So it's been roughly about a month by the time I put this video out, and because I kind of want to be more consistent with making content, talking about books, because as you can see, I don't have many friends aside from the ones on these shelves, and I read a lot, so I want to talk more about books because those are just my passion. So this video is going to be about the whopping 5 books I read during the month of January, and I kind of want to, I'm going to do this in chronological order and start with the book I read first. And the first book I read of 2023 was Bloodmarked by Tracy Deonn, and if this is a sequel to Legendborn, and if you haven't read Legendborn yet, like, what the fuck are you doing? Legendborn was incredible. Like, did you not see that on TikTok? Like, that book was the shiznit. You should go read that immediately. And if you can't afford it, I mean, get the ski mask and, you know, hit up Barnes & Noble. They usually close at 9. Do what you gotta do. Anyway, so Bloodmarked. I think it's important to say, as I get into this video, that when it comes to books, I don't really, so let me backtrack a little bit. The characters, the plot, the writing, all of that is very important into how I kind of rate and review books. But at the end of the day, I judge a book in my own personal rating system and preference based on how much that book made me feel. Like on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being something that, like, I finish the last page, I throw the book to the side, I get up, I leave my room, and like 30 seconds later, I forget it was on the last page. That's typically like a 1 for me. And there's multiple reasons for that. Maybe I didn't enjoy the plot. I'm a big characters person. For me, your characters will make or break your story. So if I don't love your characters, I'm not gonna feel anything about the book. So that would be a 1. But a 5 would be, I get to the end of the book, I kind of have to just sit on the floor with my back against the wall for a minute and contemplate what my existence kind of means now that I'm stepping outside of this world and stepping away from these characters. And it's a story that just has like a profound impact on me, and I kind of move through space slightly differently than I did before. That is a 5, and all that is to just say that, shit, I should probably be holding this up higher, that Bloodmarked kind of falls in the middle there for me, in that this isn't like, this was a fun story, I enjoyed it, but it wasn't something that necessarily gripped my soul. And after I closed the last page, I felt like, or closed the last page, after I closed the cover, after I read the last page, I felt like, wow, I am a changed man from reading this book. It didn't have a profound effect on me like that, but I did enjoy it. I enjoyed revisiting these characters. I enjoyed Bree, I enjoyed Nick, I enjoyed Cell. I really enjoyed a lot of the information we got about what it means for Cell to be a Merlin. I enjoyed seeing like the regents and more of the Knights of the Round Table. I really enjoyed without spoiling too much, the kind of tension that existed between Bree and Cell and what that meant going forward. I really enjoyed how they played with this idea that Bree is the scion of Arthur, and how like the regents handled that, and how that was really portrayed in the book. I felt was incredibly accurate and would happen in real life, in the situation where you have a young melanated girl who's thrust into a position of power, and the people who are already in power kind of have like this idea that like, hey, yo, we don't want no melanated people in this shit. So I really enjoyed that. It was a fun book. I love the magic system. I did have, so the couple of things I will say, these aren't like bad things, these are just like personal nitpicks, is that I am not a fan of, like, so there's this concept, I guess, it's called like As You Know, Bob, where a character will explain something that another character should already know for the sake of the reader. And I feel like there was a lot of that present in this as well as Legendborn, in which you will have characters give like a lot of exposition about like the history of the world, or like how magic works. And people usually don't talk like that, like in these large like exposition info dumps. And another thing too is it just sometimes feels a little forced and unnatural, especially for children who are supposed to be, you know, young adults. I don't know anyone who just, you know, spouts off into random like knowledge and information about like the Roman Empire at the drop of a hat, you feel me? So I feel like it comes off a little unnatural, and there's a lot more a lot more. There are better and more effective ways, I feel like, to hold the shit up higher, Johnny. There's more effective ways to kind of introduce us into the world you've created that don't come across as just so tactless. You feel me? Like in the Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin, at the end of each chapter, she has like these small excerpts of lore that introduce mythology and history of the world she's created, but because they come at the end of the chapter, they don't disrupt the chapter. Does that make sense? So all in all, to just conclude that little brief mini tangent, Blood Marked was the first book I read of the year. I don't know if it will make my top 10 just because there's so many things I'm looking forward to this year, but I definitely enjoyed it and it was a strong start to 2023. Next, I have it might be too early to tell, but this is definitely going to be one of my top 5 books of the year. I can just feel it. And that is A Psalm for the Wild Built. By Becky Chambers. I went to Texas a few weeks ago for a baby shower. I started this book that morning before my flight. I read it at the airport and then I finished it on the plane. It is a very short, quick read. And this was the kind of story that impacted me on a soul deep level because it is about the beauty of just existing without having to attach meaning to your existence. And I think for someone like me, who is both a creative and a perfectionist and holds myself to sometimes impossible, unreachable standards, and who measures my worth based on what I can produce and what I can accomplish, I forget sometimes that there's simply a beauty in just existing and that I don't have to be or do anything to have worth. I simply have to be. And this book reminded me of that. It's like a gentle, warm hug. It's like a campfire on a really cold night up in the mountains. This is the kind of book that just wraps its arms around your heart and gives it a firm, but at the same time, soft and loving squeeze. I know when I review these books, I don't get too much into what they're about. I probably should start doing that going forward, but fuck it, we're in too deep to pull out now. But all in all, this is just a phenomenal story for anyone who wants to be reminded that you don't have to have a purpose to be valuable. And the main character, Sibling Dex, who is a tea monk, discovers this on a journey with a like this robot named Mosscap, who they meet because they're gender neutral, so it's they, them, who they meet on their adventures. And it's really an incredible, beautiful, philosophical book just about like the meaning of life and existence. And they have some incredibly profound conversations, especially towards the latter half of the book. I might be doing a horrible job explaining the story, but I'm doing this in one take, so yeah. But I'm gonna read an excerpt actually from this story. Okay, here is the quote. It's in the middle of a conversation, so it's gonna be slightly out of context, but it says, "You keep asking why your work is not enough, and I don't know how to answer that because it is enough to exist in the world and marvel at it. You don't need to justify that or earn it. You are allowed to just live." And excerpts like that are why I can already feel in my bones that A Psalm for the Wild Built will most likely be in my top 3, if not my number 1 book. And I am incredibly excited to read A Prayer for the Crowned Shy, which is the sequel to this incredible novella by Becky Chambers. The third book I read in January was one I kind of took a gamble on, and that was Gallant by B.E. Schwab. I'm gonna be honest, this was really a kind of unforgettable book, and that surprised me because V.E. is like goated. And when I say unforgettable, it just kind of felt like nothing in this story stood out to me. And as someone who reads books for characters, I did not connect to anyone in this story, and as a result of that, I really just didn't feel anything reading this book. So what Gallant is about, I'm gonna start like talking about what the books are actually about, giving like a rough summary. All right, so I'm gonna be real with y'all. I am terrible at trying to summarize books, so I'm just gonna like read the inside sleeve jacket. So this is what it says. All her life, Olivia Pryor has wondered who she truly is and where she belongs. Her only clue is a slim, battered journal, her mother's journal, full of entries that seem to show that she was unraveling, and drawings that look like blots of ink, until Olivia notices a hand, a door, a bloom, a skull. Then a letter beckons Olivia home to Gallant, the one place her mother's journal warns her never to go. Olivia goes anyway, of course she does. What she finds is her last living relative in her family's manor, a manor with a ballroom and a sitting room and a study and a sprawling, vibrant garden, and the crumbling ruin of a garden wall with an iron door, a door she must never open. But no one at Gallant sent Olivia that letter, and no one will tell her what haunts her cousin's dreams, what happened to her mother, or what lies on the other side of the wall. Did the shadows call Olivia home? What will they ask of her in return? Yeah, no offense, the book to me was not nearly as interesting as all of that made it sound. Like, I feel like this would have been a much better book if it had been a novella. This is 334 pages, and honestly, it could have gotten away with like 150. And again, as someone who reads for characters, it was really difficult for me to connect to Olivia. I low-key forgot this girl's name until I read the summary, because she doesn't talk throughout the whole book. She can't. It's not really a spoiler. She's a mute, and there's nothing wrong with that, but like, it really just made it difficult for me to connect to her. One, because she doesn't talk, and two, because her internal thoughts just weren't that interesting to me. And I just feel like we did not get to spend enough time with these characters to fully inner, and understand them. And I just feel like this story wasn't for me. I wasn't who she was trying to reach. And I also feel like the ending, the resolution was rushed. And there was a couple of things that I feel like could have been explained in a little bit more depth, and it kind of left me wanting more. And that's an unusual thing, I have to say, of a V.E. Schwab book. So Gallant was all in all, to me, pretty forgettable. It left me wanting more. Like, it wasn't a boring read. It was interesting enough to keep me turning the pages, but at the same time, I kind of struggled to figure out why this was a 334-page book that could have easily been capped at like 160, and it felt like there was a lot of extra fluff. And all in all, this was a book that I closed and really didn't think too much about again after I finished it. So that was book number 3. And book number 4, I'm not going to say too much about this, but it was actually Pillow Thoughts by Courtney Peppernell, and this was like my first attempt at getting back into poetry. I used to be a part of a writing club, a writing group, back when I lived in Georgia, and I was actually an assistant teaching artist for that writing group when I was this was 2 years ago, so I was 19, I was 18 going on 19. And I kind of stopped reading poetry as much. I stopped going to spoken word events and like slam poetry competitions. I haven't really been in that space just because it's not really big where I live, and I've really been interested in re-entering the world of poetry. And I saw a lot about this at on TikTok, and I also work at a Barnes & Noble, and I went to the poetry shelf, and that's like the first thing I saw. So I was like, fuck it, and I just grabbed this and like 2 other things that looked semi-interesting. And so when I was reading the reviews for Pillow Thoughts, a lot of people felt like the poems themselves were like surface level and lacking substance. And I think that's obviously very subjective, in that what you define as profound is entirely contingent upon your experiences and what you personally believe is simplistic versus profound. Now, to me, I am currently in a long distance relationship, and this is a book that is about love and heartache and love and loss and heartbreak and rediscovering love and finding yourself somewhere in the midst of that process and what it means to truly and fully love someone. So because of my current situation, this just really plucked at a lot of heartstrings. And I feel like even if you hate every single poem that's in this book, there will be at least one that just kind of resonates with you in a way that will inspire you to go pick up a highlighter, come back, sit down, highlight it, take a picture of it, and maybe revisit it again. But I think this is definitely something, if you go into it with an open mind, an open heart, and a receptive soul, you can definitely feel touched. So Number 4 was Pillow Thoughts. Number 5, so this shit is a piece of paper. It's because, okay, I'm gonna explain in a minute. It's Hellbent by Leah Bardugo. It's Leah Bardugo. I've heard Bardugo and Bardugo. I'm gonna say Leah Bardugo. So the reason I'm holding a piece of paper for Hellbent is because I actually bought Hellbent for one of my best friends. I didn't buy 2 copies at once because I don't be having the money like that. So I bought her copy, and then because I wasn't gonna see her for a while, I read the shit out of her copy first. So that's why I'm holding up a piece of paper, because I haven't bought the copy for myself yet. And I know some people might be like, oh my God, what'd you think of Hellbent? What'd you think of Ninth House? And I am going to preface this by saying, I didn't hate Hellbent, but I didn't fall in love with it either. I also was kind of on the fence a little bit about Ninth House, because I just, like, it was interesting, but it didn't, like, I didn't fall in love with the story. And I feel like Hellbent would have been a much, much better novel, like, perception-wise. I would have perceived it as a better novel had Ninth House not come out 3 years ago, because it feels like for a 3-year wait, to me, Hellbent did not really live up to the hype you think a book would have when you've been waiting for it for 3 years, if that makes sense. Like, because Ninth House came out in 2020, if Hellbent had come out in 2021, this would have been a phenomenal read. But because it came out such a long time ago, I was kind of expecting something more. I was expecting more than what Hellbent offered, and it was very much obviously a setup for another book, which is totally fine. You always need that middle book to kind of bridge the first and the third. It happens. Or not bridge the first and the third, but they just kind of serve as like setting the grounds for that big epic conclusion that'll come in the third book, because I believe this is supposed to be a trilogy. So yeah, that was kind of my only thing. I don't want to spoil it. Like, again, I will admit I did not read Ninth House before reading Hellbent, so I was confused for a good 20 pages. Like, hey, who the fuck are y'all again? Like, so I had to kind of remind myself and refresh myself on, okay, this is Dawes, this is Michelle, these are Alex's roommates. Oh, this is why Darlington's gone. Oh, this is Dean Sando. So like, once I remembered what the actual plot of Ninth House was and what the plot of this book was supposed to be, and I like enmeshed myself in the story and I felt like I was immersed in the world, I enjoyed the characters. I really enjoyed a lot of Alex's and Detective Turner's exchanges. It's really hard to talk about this book without spoiling it. I would definitely say there are some segments in the latter half of the book that involve some specific characters going to a specific place, and we get to experience things from some different perspectives. And I really enjoyed that. I felt like that was one of the strongest parts of the books. I'm trying not to spoil this so hard, but I enjoyed being with these characters again. I really enjoyed being back with the kind of secret societies and being reminded of how like this kind of second shadow world at Yale operates and how they move through space. I enjoyed Our Gentleman Demon. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to spoil anything, but I enjoyed our Golden Boy of Leaf, and I did miss a lot of these characters, and I thought this was a really, I just feel like this is such a good story. I just feel like the gap between this and Ninth House just messed it up for me personally, because I feel like, again, had it been like a 1-year gap between Ninth House and Hellbent, I would have loved it. But because I waited for so long and I was expecting something to like compensate for those 3 years of like biting my fingernails and checking release dates, that I was left slightly underwhelmed. That's all I'm gonna say. But if not for the unfortunate gap that was no one's fault, the pandemic messed up scheduling and publishing for a lot of people, if not for that, I definitely feel like this would have been a much more fulfilling read. And now all that to say is I am currently reading Daughter of the Moon Goddess by, I believe it's Sulin Tan. and I'm on page 108. I'm hoping to finish this hopefully in the next few days, and I'm really enjoying this book so far. It is definitely a YA novel, and when I say that, I mean it is very fast-paced, as YA novels typically are. Like, there's like a time skip of a few months on the same page, and I'm enjoying the characters, and it's really nice to read a story that's stooped in sort of Asian mythology and Asian culture, because I haven't read too many books like that, and I'm like, the story is just now kind of picking up, and there's not really that much I can say about it, because this is a 498 page book, and I'm only on 108. Yes, I don't really know enough about the magic system, about how the world works, or like the politics. I have a rough idea of a little things here and there, but I'm definitely enjoying it so far. It's interesting. I will admit, the writing style is a little blunter than what I'm accustomed to, in that it's very like short and kind of abrupt sentences, and that I feel like it's just written in a way that's taking some getting used to and some digesting on my part. But apart from that, it's shaping up to be a good story, and I'm excited for this, and I'm excited for Heart of the Sun Warrior. So yeah, those were my 5 books that I read in January, and hopefully I can read a lot more in February. I'm hoping that I can finish A Daughter of the Moon Goddess by February 1st, so that way I can start the month with A Prayer for the Crown Shy by Becky Chambers, which is again the sequel to A Song for the Wild Built. And if you have any suggestions on books that I should check out in February, if I haven't already bought them, I would love to hear them. So yeah, thanks for tuning in.
Fantastic.